Hi, everybody. Am I on? Okay. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sticking with it this long. We have one more panel before lunch. I want to say one thing. There is an overflow room in the penthouse that's about 20 degrees cooler with a live video feed and refreshments, food and drink. So if people start getting up and leaving, I will not be offended. I highly recommend it. Thinking about the topic of the panel we're on today, I was thinking back to a conversation I had a couple weeks ago. Is Carrie here? Carrie McDonald?
Yes.
Where'd Carrie go?
She was here.
Maybe she went upstairs. Anyway, I interviewed Carrie about her wonderful new book on choice and microschools and homeschooling and unschooling, all these really interesting things that have kind of been brewing since the pandemic. And one of the people she talked to for this book was a Kansas mom who started her own microschool. And she said something that's really still stuck with me today. And I want to get the panel to introduce themselves and reflect on this after they say who they are. So you're first, Jeanne. Okay. This is a mom, again, who started a microschool. She told Carrie, the fringe is becoming the cloth. What do you think? Is the fringe becoming the cloth?
Such a great question. Jeanne Allen, founder and CEO of the Center for Education Reform and co-creator of the Yost Prize for Sustainable, Transformational, Outstanding, and Permissionless Education.
Nice.
In 1994, there was the front page of Time magazine with a kid with his hand up, and the headline was, "A New Grassroots Revolt." And it was on the heels of Colorado and Minnesota. Minnesota obviously being the first, Colorado a couple years later passing their charter school law. And the entire article was about how there were these parents who would actually have the audacity to create their own school and send them somewhere else, and all of the hell they had to pay in their community. And there was a period of time where CER was brand new, and we were getting calls from parents saying, they're telling me there's something wrong with me, that I'm actually questioning what's happening. They're telling me I'm on the fringe, which is why it's so funny that you say that.
We have not conferred about this,
No,
by the way.
what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so we're like, wait, there's all these people coming from different states and different communities. They're all being told they're on the fringe because they said, I want out. And so that fringe was always, actually, I think, in the vanguard and the mainstream. And it's just that we all take a little longer than most people to come to the party and realize this has been going on in an undercurrent. We just didn't pay attention.
So parents were ahead of everybody else, is that what you're saying?
Parents have been ahead of everyone else even before COVID. They knew, and they were watching it, and I was bugging people like you, cover it, cover it, cover it, and it wasn't until it actually happened to reporters' own neighborhoods and own homes that they started covering it.
Excellent. Okay.
Ashley Berner. I am the co-founder and director of the Johns Hopkins Institute for Education Policy. It's great to be here. Thank you for this time. I think the question of the fringe becoming the whole cloth, it's interesting when you think about how our system has always enabled well-off families to do the very expensive tutor or to do the homeschooling with all the different supports they could have. And when the pandemic hit, we certainly saw some of that with very wealthy people going out to the Hamptons and paying top dollar for top teachers to do it. What we haven't done in this country is to make it possible for all parents to exercise agency in that way. And so, when you talk about the fringe becoming the cloth, when I hear that, I think, we should all be both, right? We should have a generous space where we help all families find the school or the type of school or the learning experience that works for them. And so that we're not even comparing fringe and cloth, or this cloth is better than this cloth. We're making sure that they're all good cloths or good fringes. And that's in fact what most countries do. So I hope we'll be able to unpack that a little bit.
So you want it to be all cloth?
No, I want a mosaic of different cloths,
Okay.
all of which are
Yeah, it's
high
not the same cloth.
performing.
It's just you want an Amish quilt?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's
Where
lovely.
every little piece of it is high quality.
Okay. Good.
Every piece is high quality.
Let's keep that in mind. Ryan.
I'm Ryan Delk. I'm the founder and CEO of Primer Micro Schools. I did not know Greg was going to ask this question, but I am sort of living proof of this dynamic that you talk about. 28 years ago, my mom started one of the first micro schools in Florida. She wrote her last paper getting her teaching degree on why private school, charter school, and homeschooling should be federally banned, with very significant penalties for parents that dared not follow that. And then we lived in a low-income neighborhood, she took me to kindergarten orientation, and she realized about 90% of the kids at the school were below grade level. And so she did a very quick 180 and started one of the first micro schools in Florida. But it was total chaos, total Wild West. We had friends we had a friend that actually had like CPS called on them and had like lost their kids temporarily because they were involved in this. I mean, it was total insanity. And so it was as fringe as it could get. And then now, and by the way, I would not be here if it was not for the sacrifices that they made. She ended up running this school for 16 years. And so Primer at this event is sort of all proof. I think this whole movement is proof of this shift from the fringe to something that I think is now much more mainstream. Certainly we don't have people getting CPS called on them for trying alternative education. So this is a story that's very near and dear to me. I think it's a great opener.
And just before we move on to Felicia, just tell us like the quick elevator pitch about your company, about Primer.
Primer is very simple.
Primer, excuse me.
We help great teachers launch schools in their communities. We are able to deliver an education for K through 8 students at about 1/3 the cost of the traditional system, deliver top quartile academic outcomes as measured by the NWEA MAP test, which we administer 3 times a year. And we've had thousands of teachers apply to launch schools across their communities. We're in Florida, Arizona, Alabama. Right now, we're launching in Texas next year.
Excellent. Okay.
Wonderful.
And Felicia.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Felicia Cummings-Smith, President and CEO of the National Center for Families Learning. So I represent and are speaking on behalf of millions of families across this country with whom we work. And I take this quote and think about the role of moms. The role of moms as a child's first best teacher and how that has evolved to also to be their best advocate. And we work with a lot of moms through the work of family literacy, which has been foundational work of this organization for over 35 years. And, we have seen how parents have moved from consumers to partners in accountability, which we heard from the previous panel, but now also demanding to be the decision makers. And we want to see an environment, an ecosystem that allows for parents to be partners, real partners in meaningful decisions, from curriculum to assessment to decision making on safety. And that is the work that we are doing as an organization to help elevate and give voice to parents in this process.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those great introductions. I want to kind of start the conversation. And by the way, you are not limited to just talking to me. I welcome you replying to one another. Like to have a conversation. I always say, like a brunch without the bottomless Bloody Marys. So, I want to start with Jeanne. You talked about how kind of it's been a tough thing to get reporters interested in until it happens to them.
Yeah.
By the way, we homeschooled our kids for several years. Long story. But it feels like, this idea of it happened to them, feels like it happened to everybody in 2020. Something sort of like clicked, something fundamental shifted. I guess I want to think about 2020, but also think about like previous 2020s, if you will. What are the beats that brought us where we are now?
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because there were several points in time where the nation was outraged. And they actually do track with leadership at the national level. And so while many of us in this room are huge supporters about restoring power to actually parents, I will bypass states. I don't think they should go directly to states. I think it should go to parents, subject of the conversation. When there was the goals 2000, right? When there were the race to the top, there were people that got excited. They read things. They thought, this is my chance. And so we actually see shifts. If you look at some of the stuff we've written over time, we saw shifts at those point in time in the increase in schools proposed, the number of students going to those schools. We saw shifts actually in some states with achievement getting better. And so you'd see all this energy going. Bad news story, President of the United States addresses it, governors get together in Charlottesville, or governors get together in Washington at NGA meeting. I was talking to the guy who was NGA last night, and they all race to it, and then states compete. And so then when states started creating, so that is the backdrop of the national, which is why the bully pulpit is so important, which Bill Bennett did better than anybody else to this day. And then the governors jump on board, and so you had a rash of governors. You had the Anglers and the Pete Wilsons from California, and the Tommy Thompsons from Wisconsin, and then they brought energy by passing laws. When you don't see activity, legislative activity, you don't see as much advocacy. And so when we got to 2020, and no one knew what to do and thought the world was falling apart, and then we finally came out of it, what did the people who were smart enough, bold enough, and didn't care about whether the unions were after them do? They started passing permissive laws to allow more to happen. They said, we're getting this done. Nowhere is there a better example, and it's hardly talked about, than Iowa and Kim Reynolds. Iowa's a sleeper. It was like Wobegon. They didn't do anything. They didn't have a charter school law. They didn't have school choice. Nobody cared. They're like, we're great. We're Iowa. We have a state fair. Right? Governor Reynolds wakes up and says, I want this done. She got it done in less than 3 months. One of the boldest, most aggressive school choice laws coming out of COVID. So it gave people the impetus to do things, but people responded immediately because those parents were already there in sleeper cells throughout their states, waiting to seize the moment.
You sure you want to use that phrase?
No, but it sounded really good at the moment, so excuse me.
Can I use an alternate phrase? How about permission structures? Is that a helpful way to?
How about parent power structures?
Parent power structures. Okay. Folks react to Jeanne's sort of short history.
Jeannie, you know that.
Jeannie, sorry, I'm sorry, Jeannie.
I mean, I just want to pick up on the kind of permission structures.
Yeah.
At least in my experience, the biggest barrier to having widespread parent agency and quality control also, because I definitely believe that we cannot take our eyes off of academic quality. That's one of the big debates in this field, right? Do we care about academic quality, and if so, how do we go about ensuring it? Big debate. The biggest barrier to permission is our cultural habit of thinking of public education as one thing. And so if you go into these debates at state level, sometimes between unions and reformers and so forth, you hear this zero-sum game, right? You still have the argument that public education means one thing and one thing only. And any departure than that has to justify itself on superiority, better research, that we weaponize our research and so forth. So what I'm hoping is that as states have actually made changes and people begin to see the difference of, hey, public education could be many things. It doesn't have to be one thing. But it is a cultural mindset. It's the habit we were all, I mean, I'm old enough to have been raised with pre-charter. There's public and private, and that's it. You know, and can we imagine that these new capacities that states are giving to parents and families and teachers, that this will actually, in and of itself, start to change the conversation and the experience. I'll just give one example. Washington, D.C. is 50% charter. Does anybody remember how hard won those charters were? It was a battle royale, right? Well, young families in Washington, D.C. sometimes don't even know if they're choosing between a charter and a district now. The entire the plausibility structure has changed, as they say. So that's what I'm hoping will happen with these changes, that it will result in a new understanding and a more actually generous space in which we can focus on getting kids what they need.
If I can just add one
Please.
thing, I think to pick up on this idea of parent power, understanding that parent power should be for every parent, making sure that all parents have access and opportunities and understand how to navigate the systems that are being created that are so complex. We need to understand that we have 58.9 million adult learners who have low literacy skills. Many of those parenting adults have children with low literacy skills. And being able to understand and feel like you have power to make decisions means you need the knowledge, the skills, the capacities, transportation, access, opportunity to be a partner and be an informed decision maker. So I think this power piece and parent power piece is, let's ensure that all parents, all children have power and opportunities.
May I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So do you have examples of, I know there are wonderful organizations like Families Empowered, I think it is, or in
And
Texas.
NCFL.
Yes, that help people navigate that. But are there states that have said, yes, we're passing all these choice laws, we need to provide the support that parents need on the ground?
I think there are some examples of that. One of the ways in which we believe that it's critical to engage parents is to ensure that their voices matter in when policies are actually being created. So we need legislators, we need others across the country to be listening to the voices of parents so that the policies are designed to be created for all. So I would say states who have the strongest examples are states who are listening to the parents and helping design solutions related to them.
But here's two of the challenges, if I may.
I
I'm
love
going
that
to
they're
bring
talking
Ryan
with
in.
each other.
But here's two of the challenges. The first challenge is when people go to vote, they don't vote for legislators based on education.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's like a passing parade. We're talking to legislators right now in real time. My team is, and they're like, we didn't know we were really bad on this. Can you tell us how? How do you not know this, right?
Right.
So that's one, because why? When they go to vote, if they do vote, they're not saying, I'm voting with you because of that. The second one, when it comes to power, which is fundamental, we are not giving money with any of the existing programs, maybe with the exception of a couple of charter laws. Full and fair funding should follow students. How does a parent become powerful who has low income,
Right.
low skills, when you say, here's $6,500, it's a choice? What are you paying for? Meanwhile, we're paying $18,000 in the traditional system. So the absolute scandal for choice people, including myself, is that we are actually allowing and applauding people who are like, whoa, great, $7,000, you're gonna go be powerful. You're not. And so there's kind of a reason that we're not getting more pushback on it, because they're perfectly happy to watch this go away. And that is the next civil rights battle, full and fair funding. And I wonder if you guys think, if you had all those funds following kids, could you do more primers? Could you have more parents more powerful? Would we see more pluralistic options?
I guess I'm asking a fundamental question about the practicality. So I'm thinking about Pat Wolf's story, his study of the Opportunity Scholarship Fund here in DC, which is Congress always fights about it, but they allocate money for low-income kids to go to private schools in the district. And when Pat was the researcher of record, and he interviewed parents at every stage, and one of the things that he said was, we miss this, but 40% of adults in many of our urban centers are functionally illiterate. You can't give them a piece of paper that says, here are your options, choose. And I will never forget his words, they need a person. They need a person. And so I look at other systems around Europe, for example, where they're very used to funding all different kinds of options for parents. They actually fund a position at the local level, many of them, to help parents in whatever languages they need, because the research shows that parents are operating and making these choices according to their social networks. Well, your social networks are unequally equipped, right? So that's what I know. I guess at a practical level, are we paying attention to that?
So where are we seeing? Is there, just to take your point, where are we seeing systems with a person, kind of helping parents, figure out the maze?
Yeah.
I'm not feeling sorry for Ryan, but I do want to bring him into this and ask him a question because
Go for it.
because honestly,
You didn't even feel sorry for me.
I think he has the answer because primer kids go out, they have to recruit people. The great thing about those systems is the charters that aren't suffering here, they're going out to people.
Yeah.
They have the people. The schools themselves have the people, not the state.
Ryan's just waiting for his moment. That's all it is.
Yeah, we built an entire engine for this. So we have a marketing team, parent engagement team.
Yeah.
The thing I would say that's important though is that well-intentioned legislatures do not understand the way in which what they perceive to be benign one-line rules in the rulemaking process or in statute have a dramatic impact on the accessibility of these programs to low-income families.
That's right.
So I'll give you an example. A very prominent state that just passed a school choice program that will go unnamed was working through the rulemaking process recently, and I was sitting with them and they said, hey, it's really important that we cut off applications by February 1st because we need to make sure that we can dedupe all the applications and make sure that the public school students are not getting double funded. And I said, well, that's an API call against a database that my team or any other competent engineer can write for you and can happen in 30 seconds. I'm not sure why you need 7 months for it. And they were sort of very hung up on this. And I said, well, let me get you some data. And so I asked my team to pull this, and I said, let's go find all the families that are within 200% of the federal poverty line and when they applied for their scholarship, because we have all this data. It turns out 90% of families below that are within 200% of the federal poverty line apply for their school choice scholarship after February 1st, and 50% apply after July 1st.
Right.
So if you're going to shut down these scholarships, if you all know families that are within 200% of the federal poverty line, I assure you that in January they are not sitting around
about
thinking,
school choice.
where are my kids going to school next August? Doesn't exist. Doesn't
Yep.
happen. And so
Good
what I
point.
would sort of humbly suggest is that for the folks that are thinking about these policies, really think about the ways that these seemingly benign, small, in this case, accommodating the sort of incompetence of the bureaucratic machine, impact the people that we purport for these programs to serve. Because once those things go into rule or become part of statute, it is very difficult to overcome it with any amount of amazing parent engagement.
Would you write a code book for this so that people can take it to
have
a
it.
state?
Yeah, we have it.
Exactly.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You know, Ohio had when they passed their choice laws, the intent was for transportation dollars to be available. If you were going to a private school, there would be some sort of a sharing or route sharing. We were a charter school. And I was at an event in Ohio many years ago, and the charter school said, we don't get transportation money. I said, it's in your law. Like, well, they told us it's not. And so part of that also is on advocates and people like you to actually point it out, because many times you don't know what the practice is.
Okay. I thought you guys were just going to keep going without me.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Ashley to jump in here with a bit of sort of like big picture context. You were talking earlier about European countries and kind of their different attitudes about this. There's a phrase for this, which I want to hear you talk about, and also just give us a sense of like how they got to that place, which is very different from what we're looking at in the U.S. I mean, like almost 180 degrees.
Yeah. So this was a real shocker for me, that the United States does education very differently in our conceptions and the way we think of education. So if you walk up to someone and say, what's a public school, they're probably going to think of immediately picture of a traditional neighborhood school. Now that's changing with younger generations. Good. But if you were to ask that question in the Netherlands, people wouldn't know what to say. What's a public school? Well, the Netherlands funds 36 different kinds of schools equally and holds them to a high academic bar. So does the UK, so does Germany, so does Belgium. I could go on and on and on. And what they've done is they've done what I call educational pluralism, that the state funds a wide variety of schools and holds them accountable. And there are some differences about that from the way we construe choice, of course, and regulations and so forth. But these, in fact, it's not just Europe. 83% of the countries in the world that UNESCO tracks have public-private partnerships to deliver education. 83%. It is by far the norm. And this notion of public education is one thing, and these little things are departures from it and illegitimate in some way. The norm is choice and accountability by design, to use the U.S. parlance. I don't use the term choice because, in a way, choice is a byproduct of the uniform school system that we have, where you're saying, oh, I want a choice, as though you're asking for an exception from the norm of uniformity. So most countries are this way. It's increasing, it's expanding. Some work better than others. The policy details really, really matter. But the other piece I'll say to that is that the United States used to be pluralistic. I didn't know this either until I have a doctorate in history. I started reading this. Our school systems we would fund all different kinds of schools as a matter of principle. Most of the European countries started the process of funding nonprofits and charitable organizations, civil society organizations, to deliver education. In 1834 is when Parliament passed its laws. The 18th century is when the Netherlands and Germany passed their laws. We will fund it. We don't necessarily deliver it. We're going to hold it accountable. That's how our systems were as well. And we had many systems where there weren't enough people to have one school, but in mid-sized towns and cities, we had Catholic schools, Congregationalist schools, secular, non-sectarian schools. We had Jewish day schools that were funded in parts of New York, right? This is part of the public education system. So the question is, what changed? Well, what changed was in the middle of the 19th century. What changed for us? Other countries persisted with their pluralism. What changed for us? Middle of the 19th century, we had waves of Catholic immigrants. I mean, millions and millions and millions. And they dispersed across the country, but in some in some parts of the country,
Had to tamp us down.
yeah, they were that. Well, you're not wrong about that. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority felt threatened by, in some places like Boston, 50% of the population was Catholic. They were used to getting funding for their schools, right? This was normal in Europe. It was normal in the U.S. There was a nativist movement, and there were other things. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but we had a bizarre moment in the post-Civil War period where the post-Civil War Republican Party and grassroots organizations like the Ku Klux Klan made common cause against Catholics. There were Catholics, neighborhoods and churches were firebombed. It's hard to imagine, but that was the culture war of the 19th century that resulted in legislature after legislature after legislature putting these things in their statutes and constitutions that we will fund a uniform school system. We're defunding, quote, sectarian schools. Irony, those schools that were funded were almost all Protestant. And so if you were a Protestant majority, of course this felt normal and non-sectarian to you. If you were atheist, if you were Jewish, if you were Jehovah's Witness, the Jehovah's Witnesses had more cases before the Supreme Court in the 1930s than any other group. That's all I'll say. Sorry, I get excited about this. I just keep talking.
No, but that's
Sorry.
where the Blaine Amendment came from.
The Blaine Amendment
which now the
came from
Supreme
that.
Court has dumped twice, but yet we still have state lawmakers who will say things as recently as a month ago, like, oh, we can't do it, it's unconstitutional. No, you actually should look at the Supreme Court and Paul Clement's white paper he published. You should also actually read the Macon decision. You should go back and read the Zelman decision, right? You should go read the Espinoza decision, and that's part of the issue, right? The other issue is then we got to the 50s and 60s, and well-intentioned, we needed to create larger districts to manage, to make sure that we were taking care of and treating equally people who deserved to have an education that we had left out because of desegregation orders. And so when I think about the conversation earlier with Melissa, and I don't, no disrespect to the chancellor, I don't remember her last name, when she made the comment about literacy and trying to do reading and needing to cooperate with the unions, I thought about this panel coming up because I was like, this is the problem. You've got to actually ask the unions to cooperate with you or the community won't buy in to you helping students become literate. Let's bypass that. Let's remove them. Why do we even have districts anymore? We should be talking about why does it exist? We got other operational backroom organizations. We can hire for-profits, nonprofits. Districts were supposed to manage. Now districts emphasize their management. They interfere and they bureaucratize and they put parents last. They put special interests first, and teachers are caught in the middle. And so if you really want to talk about parent engagement, and going back to that, why don't we take out the intermediary structures that were created to support and advance our students' needs, supposedly in the eyes of the anti-Catholics and the pro-equality people, and go back to where we actually have real equality for kids.
So districts.
Done. Irrelevant.
I mean,
No.
I don't know that you. I mean, I guess I would take the position that the goal is to focus on the aim of education. The aim of education is what? I mean, most people, when it comes down to it, most of our laws, it's going to boil down to academic opportunity and social mobility. Mm-hmm. This is what, we every kid gets a chance at the best. And it's also about democratic, citizenship formation, right? Those are bound up in the content that we deliver and also in the structures. So, mm-hmm. Right? So if we're aiming for that, that's our end, our telos, then mm-hmm. the district is a means, and so is parent. I mean, the end goal of education is not parent autonomy. Right. That is one means towards the end of good things mm-hmm. for kids. Mm-hmm. And so if we take that position, we don't have to diminish districts that are actually functioning well. Mm-hmm. A lot of these states have very tiny districts that are actually doing pretty well. And we don't need to diminish an entire sector. Because guess what? There's a lot of variability within every sector. Some micro schools are great, some aren't. Some charters are good, some are not. And I'm talking about performance. So I guess I would, my own instinct is to say, let's just back away from there's one way that's better and just focus on all of these mechanisms can work. Let's make sure they are.
But if
they're
you
not.
don't diminish, here's the question. If you don't remove or give people the ability to bypass those across the board, with real power, with real equity, Ashley, then you are supporting with taxpayer money an unaccountable system that you don't support. So you're keeping someone in place because they're there, just because maybe across the country someone's working. Shouldn't there be variability per community?
Absolutely variability per community. And we're actually seeing this in places like Florida where most kids stay in the district, and then you have micro schools for parents that are adjacent and relating. And we also see things like North Carolina where the choice is so strong that districts are saying, hey man, I get it, I've got to differentiate my schools. I've got to make sure.
And up my game.
And up my game, that's right.
I guess, not to put too hard of one, and I do want to ask Ryan a question about the district thing, but when you say something like districts done, what was the thing you said?
Finished.
Done, finished. I mean, somebody can kind of squint and say, okay, this is the point of view that says public education needs to be, put in its place, needs to be reduced. This whole idea that choice is the Trojan horse for demolishing or diminishing the public system. Again, we could spend 2 hours on that question, but what's your response to that?
There's actually a thoughtful plan. It's not. I'm not just being facetious. There's actually a thoughtful plan. If we want to utilize the services of a district, let's take a New York. You say to all the schools, okay, PS 101, great, ComSci High, you're there. All the schools that exist, all the schools that are permitted, even without additional choices at that point, or traditional options, or additional micro schools and pluralism being there. Do you need me? Here's what I have. I have finances, I have backroom, I have transportation, I have HR, I have all those things. Here's what it's going to cost you. I'll order your milk, I'll get your carpet done. I'll help you hire, I'll help you fire, I'll help you negotiate. And you go, do I want you? Do I want the primer operational organization? Do I want blah, blah, blah? The money goes to the school. What do charters and private schools and micro schools do now? They find their vendors. They find their supports. Some of the best charter school networks in the country have created their own administration. They've got their superintendents, and they're leaner and meaner. Look at Catholic schools. So there is a way forward. There are already structures and models. When you give school leaders, I'm a huge proponent of school leaders with autonomy and a layer of accountability that doesn't put government over the needs and the wants of students and parents, but you can actually create the best accountable structures by giving the families and those organizations who are running those schools the ability to buy into the district if it's great, or maybe bankrupt the district, which is kind of what they did in Miami, and then Miami changed, right? In a way, that's what we've seen.
I want to get Ryan in on the district question without, in a way it might be a delicate question for you, just the idea of the role or the lack of a role for districts in this sort of vision. Where do you see it?
We actually don't interface with districts very often.
Okay.
Most of our interface is with state Department of Education, and then what we're starting to work on actually though is from a real estate perspective, many districts have excess capacity that they need to monetize, and so I think there's a big opportunity for districts to unlock that capacity for schools like Primer and other options, and there's a lot of like archaic laws that prevent that in some cases. But in terms of like the bigger question, I think it should come down to basically, do kids love school? And what are the dollar-adjusted academic outcomes? Yep. And so if you have a school that, in Primer, 85, 87% of kids say they love school, and if you can deliver great dollar-adjusted academic outcomes, that should be the name of the game.
Yep.
And whether that's a district school or a charter school or magnet school or Primer or another micro school or homeschool, whatever it is, that should be what we think about. And so I think it's an opportunity for everyone's thinking about budgets and how do we get more efficient. I think this is a huge opportunity. If you allow some of the kind of administrative, bureaucratic leviathan that has grown over the last 3 decades to kind of be pulled out of the system a little bit, empower teachers to do what they do best, and then let families decide what's best for them.
Yeah, I think it's this last piece of letting families decide what's best for them and understanding the choices that they have and ensuring that there's quality everywhere. So to your point about there being a difference in quality schools here, quality schools there, the role of the district, let's ensure that every child has a quality education, that they're engaged, that their parents understand what's happening in the school, that it's meeting their child's needs, and that they stay informed as a partner in this process. And so I think that's the piece. We're not trying to, I'm not trying to pit what type of school or what environment against one another. I don't want to cancel anything. I just believe that parents need to have the right and opportunity to understand their role as their child's greatest advocate in ensuring that their child gets what they need. And that is across every community. I haven't met one parent who actually doesn't have the same ideals for their child.
That's right.
So if we can appreciate all the choices, all the options that parents have, and ensure that all of those are accessible to every parent so that all children have equal experiences or opportunities, then I think we'll see things change in this country.
I think one thing that's troubling about how our country does education is that we really aren't honest about outcomes. We have, you look at the grade inflation, you look at, it is so easy to game diploma scores. And when, you consider, to me, the gold standard is, can this child take their high school diploma to a community college and take a credit-bearing course without remediation? Yes or no?
That's right.
And our signals are totally disrupted. We aren't being honest with parents about your child can't read, and it takes a lot of courage. And this is really the role of state leaders to say, they've done in Mississippi. If your child isn't reading, we've got these screeners, they're staying back a year. Or, that's where meaningful assessments not skills-based assessments, but really content-rich, meaningful assessments where you can tell parents the truth. Parents can't make decisions if they are being told it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, when it's not. So, and Virginia just raised its cut scores. Hugely controversial because it's going to show up as kids are not doing well. Actually, it's more honest. Takes an awful lot of political courage.
I think the challenge, though, there also is, and Ashley, I'm one of your biggest fans, and you do science and you do data and you have facts, and you're absolutely right in everything you just said. My however is this. No, my however is this. Most parents, when they do decide their child isn't doing well, don't need that assessment. They come home with the A or the B and they go, you're not reading well. How is that an A or a B? Like there's a gut check that all parents have. And I'm looking at you because I know how hard your organization has worked for 35 years, especially with parents who were cut out of the system.
That's right.
And we've gone through these battles in many, many low-income areas. And they're the low-income parents, the first people to say, I know something's wrong, but they keep telling me they're doing everything I can, and she's doing fine. And so those things are there, those assessments, those structures, those reporting, those data for the people in the system, and maybe for those of us outside. But at the end of the day, if a parent says, I don't care what the school's doing, Joni has not moved this way,
Yeah.
They need to be able to move. And I think that's where we don't do a very good job, articulating that publicly, articulating that to lawmakers, helping advocacy organizations understand it. We either talk about data or we talk about just parents and what they want. We don't talk about the fact that there's actually a balance and there has to be something to do with it once you have that information. If that makes sense.
Do you know how the Italians do school?
Really poorly in some places,
Okay.
but no. Mostly public.
What's that?
Mostly government,
Mostly
local
public?
run, yeah.
Okay.
They fund they do have funding for other kinds of schools, but not in the numbers and percentages that most of their peers.
Gotcha. We only have about another minute or two. Just wanted to kind of give the panelists a second if you want to jump in with thinking about like what the next challenges are, what the next hurdles are. What's something that we maybe don't know about this landscape that we're going to be reading about in 6 months? I know why I'm looking at you, Ryan, but I'm looking at you.
Look at the Ryan.
I think there's been a Herculean effort over the last 10 years for a lot of organizations to pass different options for parents, scholarships, ESAs, et cetera. Tommy talked about it earlier. That's all great work, but that's the demand side. And a $7,000 ESA is completely irrelevant for a single mom of 4 if all she can find is a $20,000 a year private school in her city. And so I believe that the existential problem we have to solve in school choice is ramping up not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of thousands of low-cost, high-quality schools that cost $0 out of pocket that deliver top quartile outcomes for working-class families. So that's what we're focused on.
Working class and poor families.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to give you all a minute of extra time before lunch. Thank you so much to you all for listening. Thanks to the panel.